And please rest in such a way that your left leg, your foreleg, and your foot is in front of your right leg. And place your left hand on the floor for a moment. Your left leg is in front of your right leg. And will you please take a moment and begin to lift your left knee so that you sense the weight of your knee. Begin to lift your left knee and sense. And find out, the moment that you begin to lift, whether or not you interfere with your breath, whether there's a slight grabbing in your diaphragm is when you begin to lift, and you begin to sense for yourself at this point, what for you do you experience as the weight of your knee? Place your left hand on the floor, and please now begin to make a small movement with your left hand on the floor. Your right hand means that someplace your right hand is either in front of you or it's under your head, wherever you can place it, so that your right arm, maybe if it's possible that you make it so that your right arm is resting under your head a little bit, so that your head is resting on your arm. And again, from this position, sense the initial sense of the weight of your knee. Now, please, with your right hand, sense for yourself with your right hand which two fingers are more obvious in your ability to sense yourself. Sensing your thumb, and then which finger comes. So your thumb and one finger. And for a moment, please, will you please bring your thumb and the tip of that finger together and apart a little bit. And what's the earliest moment that you can detect touching? Whichever finger it is. It could be your middle finger, it might be your index finger, but you bring your thumb, it might be your ring finger or little finger, but you bring your thumb and your index finger, and the moment that you sense touching, you come apart. So the earliest moment that you can detect. And you notice as you detect this touch, whether or not you're detecting the touch with your index finger or the tip of your finger or the tip of your thumb. And so take a moment and explore. One time, please, make the movement in such a way that the tip of your finger senses your thumb as they come together. Whichever finger it is, your fingertip senses your thumb as they come together. And apart, and together, and apart. And then shift it so that your thumb begins to sense your finger as they come together, so that you use the sensation of your thumb to sense your finger, as opposed to your finger touching your thumb. And then find the third way. Make it so that you can have your finger and your thumb come together and touch each other. That it's the sense of the whole. Not this, not that. It's not the finger, it's not the thumb. It's the sense of both. And then if you will, please stop for a moment and just sense for yourself in your hand the experience of your thumb and the finger you've just been touching, and so that you can sense that particular connection in the way that they've touched each other and the way that you've touched yourself touching each other. So that there's maybe some way of attending or some familiarity that now comes, and then shift your finger, your thumb and your finger to another, the movement to another finger, just for the moment. Your finger and your thumb and your thumb and your finger, and so that you come to touch. And again, instead of making the movement in such a way that it's done with a kind of power, it's done with a particular kind of listening and waiting, and you can sense which is more accurate? Is your finger more accurate in finding your thumb, or does your thumb know how to find your finger more clearly? And then shift to another finger, please. Maybe it's your finger finding your thumb, maybe your thumb finding your finger. Maybe it's not so clear. It's your right hand. It's your other right hand that you're doing this with. It's not your left hand. It's not the hand that's on the left side of yourself. It's the right hand that's resting on its back on the floor. And please then the fourth finger. And please make it so that you bring your little finger and your middle finger together with your thumb in such a way that you can sense which finger arrives, touches your thumb first. Is it your middle finger or your little finger? So you bring your little finger and your middle finger together, and gradually you make it so that they all touch simultaneously. It's not so easy. The nervous system, there's a reason why we can't sign our name the same every time. There's a reason why people dance and use the bass rhythm that stimulates the movement of the pelvis. Because the innervation of the musculature, it's 1 to 25,000 fibers. A single motor neuron innervates 25,000 fibers in the thighs and in the thick muscles. The innervation is 1 to 5,000 in your hand. So it becomes very difficult to innervate in such a way that this accuracy can take place. Please put your fourth finger and your index finger together with your thumb and sense which touches first. So you touch the middle finger and the index finger in such a way that they begin to touch simultaneously. And then please, for a moment, bring all four fingers in your thumb together. And again, notice the pattern with which they touch, whether your ring finger comes first or your first finger comes first. Which finger touches your thumb first and which is last? It's a cascade movement. Maybe this one, this one, this one, and this one, or do they all come together? And find if it's possible for you to touch simultaneously. And as your fingers begin to make this movement, more or less touching and coming apart and touching and coming apart, will you please now begin to roll your left shoulder a little forward and a little backwards so that your left hand is on the floor and so that you can sense this movement of rolling your shoulder a little forward and a little backwards. And you observe whether the activity of turning your attention to your shoulder somehow interfered with the movement of making this movement with your hand. And watch the timing of how you make this movement with your hand and with your shoulder. When does your hand open and when does your shoulder move? When does your shoulder move? When does your shoulder move forward? When? When does your hand open and when does your shoulder move either forward or backwards? When does your hand close? And please continue to make this movement of rolling your shoulder a little forward and backwards, but change the timing so that perhaps before you opened your hand as your shoulder went back, make it so that you open your hand as your shoulder comes forward, so that you And then for a moment, please make this movement in such a way that you can have a very, very long time of bringing your hand together and apart, but your shoulder moving forward and back a number of times. That it's not tied, that your shoulder can move smoothly forward and back. And internally you're recruiting, but as soon as your attention goes to the movement of your shoulder, what happened to your hand? And please make it so that your shoulder moves a long, long time, but your hand opens and closes and opens and closes. Please leave it and roll to your back and rest for a moment. And please roll back to the same position, your right hand above your head resting under your head resting on your hand. And please make this small movement. We call it the bell-like movement or the bell hand movement. Maybe with your right hand, your left hand resting on the floor, wherever. And please, your left knee in front of your right. And please, so if you're lying on your left side, it means that your right knee is in front of your left. If you're lying on your left side, it means that your right knee is in front of your left. If you were to paint a big red R on your right knee, which one is your right knee? All right. All right. Please make the movement to roll your left hand on the floor, please. Left hand on the floor. Please make the movement of rolling your shoulder forward and rolling it backwards a little bit. But what about your fingertips? In coordination with your fingertips. And as you make this movement of taking your shoulder forward and taking your shoulder back, and you're making this movement with your hand, with your right hand, and begin to listen that as your shoulder moves forward, in what way does your head move as you move your shoulder forward and back? So continue to make the movement. If you're lying on your right side, it means your left knee is in front of your right. Now please make the movement in such a way that as you roll your shoulder forward and your head rolls forward, that you can make the movement with such sensitivity that as your face begins to turn towards gravity, that you can actually perceive the gravitational pull on your lips and on your cheek and on the way that your eyeball, the weight of your eyeball moves forward a little bit towards the floor. You can actually begin to attend to the movement. And then to roll your head back, will you please withdraw your eye so that your eye, the weight of your eye begins to come back in your head and it's enough weight to begin to counterbalance so that you can actually begin to roll your head backwards, your shoulder and your head, so that you become, again, sensitive to the weight of yourself and the location, where you locate yourself, whether you're behind your eyes or in front of your eyes, and you can watch just the drawing of the falling of your eyes forward and the drawing them back, and make it the movement so that your head and your shoulder move forward and the weight of your face, the weight of your skin, the weight of your lips. You can perceive the change. And as you move back, you withdraw something within yourself, and so that the weight begins to roll back. And please change it so that your shoulder moves one way and your head moves the other. And if you're lying on your left side, your right knee is in front of your left. Or not. Now please make it so that you roll your shoulder back to the point that you can begin to turn your head as if to see the ceiling. As if. So you begin to roll yourself back as if to see the ceiling. And it's an interesting question as you make this movement to roll back, whether you roll back over your ribs or whether in order to make this movement of rolling, you roll your ribs into the floor under you to roll your head back. It's different between rolling your shoulder back and rolling your shoulder forward over the ribs below, or whether you're turning the ribs underneath yourself. So make the movement one way and make the movement the other way so that you can sense the difference between rolling your ribs underneath yourself to roll your head backwards. And as you roll your ribs underneath yourself, you can roll your ribs forwards, roll your head forwards. So you either move that which is closest to the ceiling over the floor, or you move that which is closest to the floor underneath you. And as you make this movement, you gradually, as you make this movement, you begin to roll back. And as you sense this movement, there comes a point in time that there becomes an involvement. This rolling under yourself or rolling over yourself, there becomes a movement in which your pelvis begins to become engaged, and you listen to how the change in the movement of your pelvis begins to change the weight of your knee. So that the weight of your knee becomes organized by the way that you organize. And if you're lying on your left side, it means that your right knee is in front of your left. I'm having fun here. And now please make the movement in such a way that you find how to roll your pelvis in such a way that you invite your ribs and your shoulder and your head to move back. What will you do to find the source of the ground in such a way that you can begin to roll your pelvis enough that your pelvis will roll to lighten your knee, and it'll begin to change the way that your head rolls, that you can roll your pelvis back to roll your head and your shoulder, or you can move your head and shoulder back in order to roll your pelvis. And gradually come to the place that you roll yourself back in such a way that your knee begins to lift away from the ground. Please leave that and rest. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Now please come and lie on your right side again. Only this time, instead of having your left hand standing, you bring your forearm to the ground in front of you, and you have your left knee in front of you. And if you're lying on your left side, it means that your right forearm and hand is resting on the floor. And it means that your right knee and your inside of your right thigh and the inside of your right inner leg is resting on the floor in front of your left leg. not behind your left leg, but in front of your left leg. Now, if you're lying on your right side, of course, it's your left leg in front of your right. Okay. Now, please, once again, explore the weight of your leg to lift, the weight of your left knee to lift. And notice again whether there's something in the way that you make this movement, whether you can make it a little lighter, whether there's something that you can do that makes it a little lighter. And now will you please leave that for a moment and move in such a way that you invite your left elbow to lift from the floor. Move in such a way that your whole left forearm is on the floor, not your palm of your hand. You lift your left elbow from the floor. And you watch, in the lifting of your elbow, you begin to attend to the direction that your head begins to move. And then please lift your left hand away from the floor. And observe that if you lift your left hand away, it means that your hand and your wrist away from the floor. What direction does your head begin to move? So you lift your hand. Nope, your elbow stays on the floor. It's just your elbow, it's just your hand and your forearm. So please make it so that you lift your hand and then you lift your elbow and then you lift your elbow and you lift your hand. And observe when your head rolls forward and when your head rolls backwards. And what about your right hand? Did it stop making this movement? Did the little bell hand movement stop in your right hand? It might have stopped. Yeah. Please change it so that you keep the movement going with your hand and your elbow. You're lifting your left hand and your left forearm, and then you lift your elbow and you go back and forth. But please make it so that your head rolls opposite. Now, within yourself, find what you would do with yourself as if you're going to lift your forearm. It means your hand and your elbow and your forearm in such a way that your hand and forearm and elbow leave the floor simultaneously. And of course, you just listen and to find out as you begin this movement, whether your hand lifts first or your elbow lifts first. And if it's not there immediately, you just follow the little movement. If you find that your elbow lifts first, then the next time lift your hand a little bit. And the next time, if your hand lifts first, you lift your elbow a little bit. And so you keep making this movement more and more clear within yourself as to how you might lift your whole forearm away from the floor. It means so that your head is free, so that your right hand continues to make this little bell-like movement, and there's no particular disturbance that you experience in your breath. Now please make it so that you lift your left knee a little bit. But if your hand is disturbed, only your knee, your forearm stays on the ground, only your knee, but you notice only your knee, but you notice, this is Nijinsky, if you notice that your breath is held even the slightest, the moment that your hand, your right hand, stops losing its sensitivity, then stop for a moment. Just leave it at that place and take a moment and sense how you initiated the movement. And wait. You didn't, like Moshe said, you didn't do it before when you got out of bed this morning, so what's the hurry? Your left elbow and your left hand and everything else, your forearm stays on the ground. Now please lift your left foot and watch the movement of your head and your pelvis as you lift your foot and lower your foot and lift your knee so that you can make a small rocking movement of your knee and your foot and your foot and your knee. And notice when is it that your head rolls back and when is it that your head rolls forward? And change the rolling of your head relative to the movement of your knee and your foot. It means that within yourself, you keep making subtle shifts so that you can find the way of within yourself to organize the movement, and your breath and your fingers stay in this quality. This, by the way, is the lesson that Moshe used to initiate the headstand series. Isn't it interesting that this lesson is the basis that you're going to learn how to do the headstand from? Now, please, within yourself, imagine lifting your whole left leg, your lower leg, and your foot. So you notice, and if your breath becomes held, stop. Stop for a moment. Just sense the weight of your leg now. Now, please lift your knee and your elbow together. Lift your knee and your hand. Your elbow stays on the ground. Lift your elbow and your foot. Lift your foot and your hand. Lift your knee and your elbow. Lift your elbow and your hand. Lower your elbow and your hand and lift your knee. Lower your knee and lift your foot. Think of lifting your knee and your foot. Find what change you have to find in the way that you find the floor. Leave it and rest. Leave it and rest. Come and lie again on your right side for a moment. Lift your forearm away from the floor. It means your hand and your elbow lifted away from the floor. Keep lifting, and then lift your knee away from the floor. Your hand and your elbow, and then your knee. Lift your hand and your elbow and lift your knee and your foot. In such a way that more or less you keep playing with how can you lift in such a way that your knee and your foot lift simultaneously and your elbow and hand lift simultaneously. Now please make it so that you lift your elbow into the air, your hand into the air, and as you lower it, please lift your lower leg. Lift your knee and your foot. Your arm comes down and your knee and your foot come up. And as your knee and your foot come down, your arm and your hand come up. And again, to the best of your, within yourself, you sense, is it my knee touching first? Is it my foot touching first? And what about your right hand? Is it still, are you still playing with this? So what criterion do we have to have if we're going to make this movement so that the hand can still be sensitive? What principles are we playing with? Please lift your hand and elbow into the air and then lift your knee up to it. Please bring your knee down to the floor, your knee and your foot to the floor, and then bring your hand down to it, down to the floor. Lift your knee and your foot into the air, and then bring your arm up to it. And then gradually take one down and then bring the other up until gradually you can sense that you can place your hand on the floor, your elbow on the floor, your knee on the floor, and your foot on the floor gradually, and such that everything leaves the floor and comes to the floor. And you find whether your knee touches first and then your foot, whether your foot touches first and then your knee, and begin to imagine, how can you make this movement more and more simultaneous? Now, begin to roll to your back as you make this movement. It means that you come away from the floor in such a way that you roll to your back, and then when you roll back forward, you roll back into this position so that you roll yourself away from the floor toward your back, from your back toward the floor, in such a way that you don't fall and you become continuously more sensitive to the possibility. Now, as you make this movement of rolling to your back in such a way that your knee and your elbow and your hand and your foot leave the floor and return to the floor, if someone could come along and touch your ribs, where exactly could they touch your ribs and to provide you with a particular pressure that would help you find a focal point, an exact focal point from which you could lift all four? What would happen? Where would the support be if someone could give you the support that you could lift all 4 points, your hand and your foot and your knee and your elbow, at precisely the same moment? And where would be the focal point within yourself if you could return everything to the floor at precisely the same moment? Where would be the focal point? There's multiple ways that you can play with this movement. Something has to roll under. There has to be some point that's equal to the point, equal to the weight. What would the shape of your back be? Please take this movement and roll all the way to your back, and then roll one time back to this position. Leave it, please. Lie on your back and rest for a moment. And please roll onto your other side. Bring your right elbow and forearm onto the floor in front of you, and your right knee and your right ankle, the right foot on the floor in front of you. And please press your right elbow to the floor and lift it. Press your elbow to the floor and lift it. Press your hand to the floor and lift it. Press your hand to the floor and lift it. Press your knee into the floor and lift it. Press your foot into the floor and lift it. Press your knee in the floor and lift it. Press your elbow to the floor and lift it. Press your hand to the floor and lift it. Press your hand and the foot to the floor and lift it. Hand and foot, press your hand and foot to the floor and then lift your hand and your foot. Press your knee and elbow to the floor and then lift. Press your head into your upper arm and then lift. Press your head and your elbow to the floor and lift. Your hand stays on the floor. Press your knee and your head to the floor and lift. Press your hand and your head to the floor and lift. Press your hand and knee and head and lift. It means your knee lifts. Press your foot and your elbow and your head and lift. Press your head and lift. Press your forearm and lift. Press your knee and lift. Press your left knee and lift. Press your left foot and lift. Press both feet and lift. Press both knees and lift. Press your right elbow and lift. Press your head and your left knee and lift. Press your lower leg, your knee and your foot and lift. Your right knee. Press your right knee and foot and lift. Press your right knee and foot and lift. Press your left knee, your left elbow and left foot. I'm sorry, your right elbow and right knee and lift. Press your right arm or your right forearm and lift. Press your right forearm and your right lower leg and lift. Press and lift. Pop. Press everything to the floor and lift. Press everything to the floor. Someone who's not in the place that I can see is lifting. There's a levitator in this room. I know there is. I just never see them. Press your elbow, your hand, your foot, and your knee, your right knee, and lift and roll to your back. And roll back. Roll back to your side. Press your right side, lift and roll to your back, and then organize yourself to roll to the other side, to this, in such a way that your left knee and your elbow go to the floor and lift. Your left knee in front. Watch very carefully. You're rolling to the simultaneous or the mirror position, but some of you will find that somewhere within you, your knee wants to go press your right knee and elbow and foot and hand and lift and pop to the back and roll over, and then roll in such a way that when you come to the left side, you press your right side and lift. And then when you roll to your side, you roll over in such a way that you place so that you find the floor, and so that you can pop and then roll over to the other, pop. Now please lie on your right side. Place your right knee in front of your left. Excuse me, your left knee in front of your right. And please sense the weight of your left knee now. And find within yourself how simultaneous it is that you can lift your knee in your hand and your hand in your knee. And notice if you haven't found some different way of being organized that gives you a different point. Almost everybody has found something that they do, and they've found either one or another strategy for making it so that they can lift their hand and their knee and their elbow and their foot, everything away from the ground and coming back to the ground together. Roll back from one side to the other once or more, once or twice more, so that you can have the sense that you land on one side simultaneously, and you land with the skill to come to the other side and land simultaneously, so that you sense where it is that you organize this point of balance, this point of support, that the weight of yourself and then please roll to your side and come to standing. This lesson invites you to find a particular evenness of tone throughout the whole of yourself. And a kind of a personal composure. Would you like to investigate for 1 second the secret to the lesson? Did you solve the secret? No? Grace, make the movement for a moment. Come around and watch. Grace does something very, very interesting. Look at what she discovered. Now, you can ask yourself whether or not she would have the same ability to lift herself if she's out there like that. She can, it's fine. She can, but she has to have a real strategy. Now, where would be the place where all this would be the lightest? And where would be the point underneath herself that she would just simply be able to find the clearest, so that there's no weight whatsoever in her hand and her legs. It's everything is lifted by this, where she counterbalances herself from. And if you watch the lesson, she gradually kept coming to the place that there was something within herself, yeah, that brought her to the place. And if you look to see if this was again a bag of flour or a bag of sand, and you had to lift this bag of sand and you had to lift it from here, wouldn't you find a place that you would roll it from? Yeah. So that's one equal and opposite, isn't it? She's found at some point that's equal and opposite to the weight that she's lifting. Yeah. Now, could there be another equal and opposite that she could use? Several people did. I don't remember someone. How would it be that if she took her abdomen forward, could she make the movement of going that way? There's the equal and opposite, isn't it? Yeah. So again, in the lessons, as we're studying the lessons, there is a clear process to invite the investigation. And that lesson took me years to figure out. Yeah. Because I did everything I could to listen to the lesson, but I kept struggling to lift. Yeah. And I've robbed you again, but I would like to invite you to understand again that within the lessons, there are ways to keep finding to meet this criterion of what it is to experience ourselves as weightless, proportional, to find the pure equal and opposite point, that everything, our limbs through our torso, can be experienced in our experience as weightless. Yeah? By the way that we find the support. If you'd like to take 1 minute before I say goodbye, go play with it for just a moment for yourself, so that you play for just a moment. How round do you have to be, or how quickly do you have to be able to explode forward? But where's the point of the equal and opposite support to the weight of your limbs? You saw how in this rounding movement she found a point within herself that she could place really a clear single point. And again, it's not to say that Grace is doing it correctly. It's just to say, here, how do we investigate these lessons? Yeah. In the beginning, as Moshe said, it's impossible. Then we make the impossible possible. Then we make the possible easy. And then we make the movement elegant. And elegance has within it the kind of lightness, a lightness of being, a lightness of doing. Now, as you roll from one hand to the other, make the bell hand movement on the right side when you're on the right side. And as you roll to the left, turn over so that you have the bell hand movement on the left side. And you find the ability to roll from one side to the other in such a way that you turn the bell hand on the side that you're rolling to. As you roll to the right, you start the bell hand movement. As you roll to the left, you make the bell hand movement so that you can have this. And somewhere in the middle, it's not right and not left, you switch from one hand to the other. And now make the movement incredibly quickly without hurrying. Have the kind of lightness and ease of movement that's the most human movement. And across the room, you look to see there's such a clear and of course, it doesn't take long before someone sees someone else do it and they tune into the movement. And before long, the entire movement spreads through the room. And so everybody makes the movement at precisely the same movement. Socially, you start to attend to everyone in the room. And before long, one row makes the movement, everybody together. And at some point in time, it starts as a conflict, but eventually it doesn't take long before everybody begins to tune to the persons above them, the people below them, the people to the right, the people to the left. And the whole coordination, beautiful. All right. Please sit up. Tune into the sense that you have of yourself in relationship to yourself and others. Jenny, I want to thank you for inviting me, for having the opportunity to be here with everyone. Soren, for being here and coming and having our conversations together. Ruth, for our moments and to have a chance to be in your dojo, wherever you are. To all the practitioners that came and visited and looked, I'm appreciative that you took the time to continue to research your own method and the little bit that I have to offer. And then to all of you for living through these 2 weeks with me and all the various moods and different places that I've visited and we visited together. So thank you so much. And I do hope that I've helped you in understanding how to investigate this method and to look into what it means to find the kind of organization that you need, self-organization, for the activities that you want to pursue in life with real comfort, with real sense of means within yourself, so that you can take this work to other people and help them with the quality of their life. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. All right, Elvis is going to leave the house. Except I have enough I have enough I to give. So, if there's anything else that anybody cares to share or say, that we have. All right, thank you so much. All right. What's that? Do I do house calls? Encores. Was that lesson okay? Was it a good place to end? Okay. Again, it involves the kind of questions and yeah, good. All right, so it's encores. Yeah, I've never been asked for an encore before, but we'll see. All right, thank you.